Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Kevin Schenk, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about architecting maintainable data templates with Copado Data Deploy. A quick thank you to our sponsors for Copado Community Day. My name is Kevin Schenk. I'm a senior manager Salesforce DevOps at Accenture. And I became a Copado champion of Copado back in 2020, where I was really supporting a public health client during the COVID-19 pandemic. With Copado, we were able to develop and deliver a contact tracing solution to production within 10 days. And I've been a huge fan of the platform ever since. Today, I have the privilege to speak with you about some of the Salesforce DevOps stories and strides that we've made at ADT. And presenting with me today is Sean. Sean, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sean Blakeney. I'm the Director of DevOps at ADT. Excited to speak to you about Copado and maintaining data templates and data deployer. I've been in the DevOps space for over 20 years, back before it was even called DevOps. I've been managing and creating deployment pipelines, SCM, infrastructure both on-prem and in the cloud, and releases in general for the 20 years. I'm new to the Salesforce and Copado space. I began that journey when I rejoined ADT in July of 2022. It corresponds with ADT's journey into this space itself.
Awesome. So,
ADT is a mission-driven company. We are focused on protecting what matters most to people, including home security, home automation, and sustainable energy through ADT Solar. ADT has partnered with several consulting firms, including Accenture, in a multi-year journey to transform how we deliver innovations for customers, both internal and external, by leveraging the Salesforce clouds. We've invested in multiple clouds, including marketing, e-com, Pardot, and CPQ as our innovation platform. Our partnership with Copado has been a foundational piece on how we deliver value. We have 16 Scrum teams, both on-prem and offshore, using the Copado DevOps platform, including Data Deployer as part of our SDLC processes. So how does ADT use Data Deployer to deliver quickly, consistently with high quality? I'll turn it back over to Kevin from our Accenture partner to go in depth about how we use Data Deployer. Kevin?
awesome. Thanks so much, Sean. And I know Sean's having some audio issues, so we'll continue on with our presentation. But it's great to have you join us as you work to get those addressed. So awesome. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about some advanced topics regarding Copado Data Deploy. For those that don't already know, Copado Data Deploy is an add-on Copado solution that allows you to deploy complex relational data, or what we like to call records-based configuration, easily and reliable between orgs within your DevOps pipeline. The solution heavily relies on data templates configured within your Copado production org to migrate records, including their field values and relationships to other related objects. Some of the other key features of Data Deploy allows you to seed and mask sensitive data into your sandbox environments, as well as being able to keep records in sync by maintaining external IDs with a record matching formula. Now, we'll talk a little bit more around record matching formula a little bit later in today's presentation. So kind of looking into how ADT currently utilizes Copado Data Deployer, we have about 46 developers today across 8 of our 16 Scrum teams, where we currently manage about 63 various data templates across 4 domains. So that would be CPQ, billing, Sales Cloud, and Service Cloud. Approximately 45 user stories are deployed as part of our monthly release process, and our teams are supporting up to 3 parallel releases in flight at any given time. When we started our data deployer journey, we actually leveraged the Copado DevOps Exchange to download those pre-built templates that are available for Salesforce CPQ. This is a great start for any organization looking to get up and running with deploying CPQ data with Data Deployer. Due to some complexities with our teams and nuances regarding parallel releases supporting them within flight, we encountered some challenges as an organization, such as the way that templates today through Copado Data Deploy And the templates that were available out of the package were nested as such, which sometimes caused confusion from our teams on understanding, well, which template do we use when we want to move a product option, for example. Templates also moved too many records. We were unable to successfully move like one record with all of its associated relationships. In addition, supporting multiple releases at a given time with an ever evolving object model made it almost impossible for us to version our data templates with new field changes, new relationships coming into our data model. Lastly, we also had a very confusing naming convention. And so we were off to try to find a way to make management of data templates better to sort out our team's needs. And that led us to discover a new way to develop our data templates. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more around two approaches, and we're going to start on the left-hand side of the screen. So one of the benefits of data templates is the way that you can relate objects to one another. Looking at the example on the left, let's say that we have an object model consisting of four objects, object A, B, C, and D. As you see on your screen, object B and D are child objects to object A. So they may contain a lookup field to object A or a master detail relationship. Object B is a child object as well to object C. So object B can be considered like a junction object between object A and object C with either lookup fields or master detail relationships. With Copado Data Deploy, we were able to create a main object template using object A, linking objects B, C, and D to object A. So whenever you specify object A to be run as a deployment task as part of moving your data up your Copado pipeline, you're able to move all related records to object A. We call this model the constructed model to a data template architecture. And some of the benefits with this is it allows you to minimize the number of template steps that you need to run when deploying your data up the Copado pipeline. The scope of this as well, the benefits is that you can move the scope of records associated with object A. So for example, if object A were the account object and object D were contacts, I would only move the contacts associated with the account as I'm moving those changes up the pipeline. Some of the use cases for this model are really around data seeding, right? Whenever you want to take data from a production environment down to a lower org that has a very defined scope of related records, or if you have a stable object model and you know that the object fields and relationships are pretty stable, they're not changing, and you want to be able to easily move records up the pipeline for any new items that you're wanting to create. But let's say we made a change to a record of object B in this example and only wanted to move that record up the pipeline. With Copado Data Deploy, you could technically create a deployment task and only move object B out of the constructed model, but that's only a partial move of that template. Object C would end up getting deployed as well with object B, and the relationship to object A would essentially get ignored. We encountered these issues firsthand at ADT, and we were determined to find a better way. That led us to what we're calling the deconstructed model towards data template development. Rather than have one object template move other related records as part of a single data template task and scope, we created one main object template for every object in scope for the records that we want to move. For any objects that have a lookup or a master detail field to parent objects, we also create templates to those parent objects that move the external ID only, essentially only moving the relationship to that parent record and not the associated data to that parent. With this approach, it's extremely important to note that order matters in the way that you load your templates within an environment. So together, let's deconstruct the example on the left over to the right. So as you see, with object A on the top left of your screen, having child template relationships between objects B and D, we need to first load object A within our template. So that's where we put object A as number one. Object C is required before B can be deployed. So we go ahead and make a single object template of object C with no relationships to it. Object B is related to both object A and object C. So what you'll notice is that we have an object B template that has two parent relationships over to objects A and C. Notice this template is an external ID only template, where all we specify on this template is the field selection of an external ID that would move just the relationship to objects A and C as part of that template run. Object D is dependent on object A. So you'll notice that number 4, we create a main object template for object D, and then link with a single external ID template to object A as part of that load. Some of the benefits with this model is that you're able to support a one-to-one match between a main template and objects that you're supporting within your ecosystem, whether that be CPQ, Service Cloud, Sales Cloud specific objects that you would need to migrate. It allows you to version templates by release, because all you need to do now, if you want to make a change to the object model for this particular template, is use Copado's cloning feature to be able to clone a particular template, reversion it, give it a new field or the changes that you would like to make for that particular version, and then carry forward. You can also more selectively migrate records and its intended relationships up the pipeline. Some of the use cases with this is this allows you, if you want to move more selective records as part of your delivery process, let's say you make a change just to a product option record as part of your CPQ development, you can selectively move just that product option up the pipeline without worrying about the other records that would get moved as part of your deployment. This is also a great use case when you have a dynamic object model where you're consistently adding new fields, new relationships, maybe some related objects to your CPQ, for example, data model. So if we have some time during Q&A, I will try to show a demo of this capability. But for timekeeping, I want to cover a couple of additional areas of data deploy and best practices that we've established at ADT. So one of the ways that Copado keeps records in sync with your pipeline is by utilizing external IDs on the objects that you're planning to move. The unique value within this external ID field is what Copado uses to identify records as you move them from org to org. It's not always simple to determine uniqueness across those records, but fortunately with Copado Data Deploy, you can set record matching formulas to automatically populate unique values within your external ID fields. So the table that you see on your screen is how ADT is currently handling record matching formulas within our environments. So we start by creating an external ID field called the Copado external ID on any record that we move. This external ID is a 100-character ID marked as external ID and unique case sensitive. In order to populate that external ID and leverage Copado's record matching formulas, we have to create, what we do is we create a formula field and we call it the Copado org record ID. What this is a formula that is set on every record that is in scope for Copado Data Deploy that leverages both the organization ID of the sandbox that you're in, concatenated with the ID of the record that is specified within that environment. Now, the reason why we do this is it gives us the understanding and flexibility to know where a record may have originated as you've developed that record and push that record up the pipeline. If there's ever an issue where we need to do debugging, it's very quick to see which record originated out of a dev org versus a record that may have originated out of a test environment or higher. We also added a third formula field as a checkbox, and this additionally helps us determine and debug through SOQL queries a match between the Copado external ID that Copado would automatically populate with this org record ID and determine whether or not the org record ID and the Copado external ID equate to one another. When debugging, right, this allows you to see the records that actually originated out of the environment you're querying from versus records that didn't. And this is a great way in case you have any challenges with external IDs as part of the Copado data load through Data Deployer. So within Copado, you'll specify a record matching formula utilizing that Copado org record ID formula field. And this org record ID, like I've mentioned before, allows you to see that originating org where that record was created. Moving on to the next slide, we also wanted to cover a little bit more around the naming conventions that we leverage for our data templates. This is specifically to the deconstructed model, where remember what I said, order matters in the way that you move your objects up the pipeline. This data template naming convention is how we make sure our teams are aware of what template to use when it comes to migrating a particular object up the pipeline. So we first start with a domain. You can determine your own domains based on how you guys are managing projects within your organization. We offer 4 domains: CPQ, billing, sales, and service. Order number drives the sequence or the order at which you would load that object based on the deconstructed model. This number can also be utilized as the order value that you can include on the deployment task record on the user story as you're moving that data throughout the pipeline. Version drives the version that is used to support that particular template when we're managing parallel releases. With ADT, we deploy on a monthly cadence, so our version numbers are based off of year, month. To make a change for a future release, all we need to do is clone the object template, rename it with the new version that the template change is occurring on, and then make the appropriate changes on that template. Simple as that. And then lastly, we have the object name field, and that is to identify the API name of the object that the developer wishes to move. The XID template is also a special naming convention that we offer. Now, remember how we talked about we're going to relate parent records over to your child data template. That is through an external ID only template that gets created. And from a naming convention, because these templates do not need to be versioned, we keep it as simple as domain-xid-object API name. Now, there could be certain instances where you have one object that has 2 lookup fields to the exact same parent object. And a good example of that would be product option within CPQ. You have a configured SKU and an optional SKU. What we do is we create 2 XID templates, and we just label them XID product 2 and then XID product 2. You can reuse those XID templates across your main templates. And so we just came up with a very generic naming convention that can drive those parent relationship templates with the data that you wish to deploy. We have a few minutes remaining, so we have about 10 minutes left. So let me show you these data templates in action with my screen. Awesome. So as you see on my screen, I actually have 2 sets of data templates that have been developed. We have the constructed model where we've created 4 templates, and I'll show you those in just a moment. And then with deconstructed, we have the deconstructed model where we have 4 templates created for each object, plus some external ID only templates that have been created. I'm going to go into first our constructed model. And in our constructed model, we currently have a single main template called object A. And you will see that we have some object fields that can be selected as part of your data template. We also specify the external ID that we're going to utilize, and in this case, the Copado external ID. And then as you set up a record matching formula, you're able to specify Copado to auto-generate that external ID for empty values by using what's called a record matching formula. This record matching formula has been configured to leverage the formula that has been created with the organization ID dash record ID of the record within the environment. And so by specifying this record matching formula, Copado will automatically populate the external ID fields in both source and target before you migrate that data template up the pipeline. It's going to take for any values that are null, any external Copado external ID values that are null, it'll populate that field with this formula field value. That's how Copado will then drive that uniqueness of records up the pipeline. Now, remember that with object A, there were two child objects, B and D, that were linked to object A. And so you'll see here on the child object tabs, we've selected these two related records, B and D, as part of templates linked to object A. And then if we go to object B, click into it, you're going to see that the object B has a parent object relationship to object C. And so you can see that here as well, to then load object C's relationship to object B. Now, if we go to this relationship diagram, you're going to see exactly what we show within the slides that we were sharing earlier. You've got an object template A as your main template, loading object B and D as childs, and then also loading object C's parent relationship to object B as part of your data load. This is the constructed model that we just described. Looking to our deconstructed model, we have, I'm going to go back here, again, one object template created for each object that needs to be loaded within your pipeline. For any objects that have relationships to parent records, either via a lookup field or a master detail, that's where we'll create XID only templates that will drive that related behavior. You'll see that we have object B here with its record matching formula set up, utilizing that Copado external ID. And on the parent objects tab, where there's a dependency on both object A and object C, we set up external ID templates to drive that the behavior of relating those objects. Going into object A's XID only template, you will see that this is all that we have configured on the template. It's a relationship just to the external ID, and we set up that record matching formula as well on this XID only template. We do not have any parent object relationships or child object relationships set up as part of this template. So that in and of itself is kind of the demonstration I wanted to show in terms of architecting data templates. I wanted to see if there was any question and answer for the remaining 5 minutes that we have on today's breakout session. I cannot see the Q&A, if that is an option. No questions. All right. So again, at ADT, we currently leverage this model and implemented it back in January. And we were able to see like a night and day difference in terms of the movement of data throughout our pipeline. You may encounter some challenges as well as a part of this model. If you load records out of order, or if you've not loaded a parent object before loading a child object that might be dependent upon that parent. So some of the things that you might notice is you may notice records that get loaded that is just loading the external ID of that record. And the reason why you might encounter that issue is if you've not loaded the parent object first before loading a child dependent object. So to address that issue, all you need to do is take the external ID of that particular object and run that object's template with that scoped external ID up the pipeline. And wanted to check to see if there's any questions from the audience. While we're waiting for some questions to come in, I also wanted to talk a little bit about um, some of the other options that you can configure on a data template. Oh, we have um, if you guys have any questions about sensitive data or being able to mask data as part of your data deploy, you can also specify object field content update settings within your data. So some of the options that are available to you as you select a field and need to load it is you can actually choose to replace the value of a particular field um, with a different value. You can also scramble the value with some random characters and digits, as well as able to scramble that with format. So for example, if there's any special characters like parentheses or hyphens within your data, you can actually scramble that information with different numbers and digits within your data. We do have a question. Copado does have the ability to create external IDs automatically, but it tries to do it for all records on that object. It would be really nice if it created the IDs only on the records needing to be moved versus all of the records in the object. Well, some of the challenges, I think that's a very interesting point, and I think there might be some challenges as well if there are certain records that don't have external IDs. There may be challenges where a record may already exist in the next level. So that's something to consider if we want to load, if we want to selectively load external IDs, how do we ensure that the record that we're loading external IDs on, or records that don't have external IDs in a higher environment, how do we know whether or not they do exist within those levels? So that's something that we would want to consider as part of the setup of external IDs within your org. But great comment. We have another comment here. A challenge we have is that we are hitting objects that in some cases have millions of records. And so this is also related to the external ID issue, where we may need only to create the external ID for a few hundred within our data deployment. So we have to create those IDs manually. This is a very common challenge, is probably if you're needing to move accounts or opportunities. So this is a challenge that needs to be kind of looked into within organizational process. But yes, that is correct. Sometimes if you do not want to set the auto update for external IDs, you can specify in Copado the ability to not update that external ID up your pipeline. And so this option, though, you will need to manually select what records you want and only populate those IDs for those particular records that you want to move. We have about 1 minute left. Any questions, comments? All right. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you today. Again, feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. I believe my information is stored on the event schedule for today. I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up after today's call. Have a great community day and enjoy enjoy all that Copado has to offer.